All right, hello all you future web devs. If you're noticing something new, you're absolutely right. You see this mark? That was me in a war with a door. The door won. All right, but let's go ahead and get on to it. We are dealing with the Build a Quiz webpage. We're going to finally wrap this up. We're on step number 51. I think we're going to go into the 60s on this one. So a little bit more than 10 steps on this. And if this is your first time following, my name is Rob. I'm a coding instructor for freeCodeCamp, where we are just going through a series of the freeCodeCamp modules, and we're trying to explain things to you as if we are the instructor teaching this and trying to help you out along with your learning journey. So if that's something that interests you, you're on the right page, you're on the right channel. Make sure that you hit that like button there for us. Really helps out that YouTube algorithm and lets us know that we're doing a great job. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in to where we left off, which is step number 51. So we're in step number 51 on the freeCodeCamp Build a Quiz webpage, and it's telling us here that we have a section element, a semantic element that we created back on our HTML page, and it needs to be 80% of the parent container. We also want to utilize the margins to be center for this section, and we want to add 10 pixels to the bottom. And then it says also at the very last thing here, it wants to be no larger than 600 pixels in width. A lot of things to digest on this, but let's go ahead and dive right into this. Now, one of the things that I typically like to do, especially in front of the class and as we're learning through some of these CSS, is if it's been a while since we looked at the HTML page, and especially with freeCodeCamp, it has us moving all around, we may not remember where are those section elements. And so as long as we know that we have them, we have the ability to put in an outline. And one of the beauties about putting in an outline is it doesn't add any kind of extra height or width to the element. It just goes around outside. And I'll bring this up over here in the special notes. It says the outline differs from borders. Unlike borders, the outline is drawn on the outside of the element. It may overlap the content, but it is not part of any kind of dimensions for that element. So the width and height are not affected. So that's a really neat thing for us to use if we want to see where are these section pieces at, so we can make sure that we're doing the right things for freeCodeCamp. So back over in our freeCodeCamp portion here, I'm just going to go ahead and do an outline, and I'm going to go ahead and do 2 pixels. We're going to do solid, and then we're going to make that red. We're going to see every single part of the web page that has that semantic element of section. Again, we can apply this outline to anything, really, but in our case here, I really wanted to see, hey, where are these sections at? It has been a while since we touched that HTML page and added those sections. Now that we're addressing it here, we can go ahead and focus our attention and looking and making sure that we're doing everything right based upon these outlines here. So one of the things it says on here, it wants the width to be 80% of the parent. So we're just going to go ahead and do width, and we're going to set that to 80%. Okay, so that check marked that part there. We can see that it's already shrunk. We're going to center this, center the sections. And the way to do that is we're going to do a margin left auto, and then we're going to do a margin right auto. Okay, and that's going to center it there for us. Now we could use some other shorthand stuff, but let's go ahead and adjust the margin bottom. We want that to be 10 pixels. Okay, so now we see we have that nice little gap in between the sections. Everything is nice and centered. And then it says on here that it cannot be larger than 600 pixels. That means we need to have a max width, and we want that to be 600 pixels. Okay, so that means as the web page grows, it gets to a certain point and then it stops. And I think we reached that breaking point right here, but it can shrink up just fine. Okay, so let's see if it likes our code on this. Let's go ahead and check our code. Sorry, did not pass. Margin top should be 0. So let's go ahead and adjust that. I didn't see that it wanted that to be 0 pixels, but we could do it this way. Let's go ahead and check the code. That does work. If we were wanting to simplify this all in one while I have us here, because this does look messy, we can go ahead and sum it all up with a margin, and the top is going to be 0. The left and right are going to be auto, and then the 10 pixels will be on the bottom. And that gives us the exact same thing as these 4 that I typed out right here. So if I were to grade this code, I would rather see the margin spelled out like that. Okay? All right, moving on to the next one here. All right, we are on step number 52 with freeCodeCamp's building a quiz web page. And I did want to bring this up just because we may have saw it on the last one. And you're like, why did you submit that with the outline? FreeCodeCamp only looks for certain things when it comes to testing. I could have added any extra property on there. And as long as I had the minimum on there, it would be okay. The other thing I also wanted to bring up on here is that the margin, notice how they have a 0, auto, 10 pixels, and then an auto. Again, another way of doing it. However, the one that we did with just 3 works the same way. Now, when it comes to this step here, it says that it wants to replace the margin of the H2 element with 60 pixels top padding. And so this one is a little confusing to me. Usually I would see something, especially from FreeCodeCamp, saying set the H2 top margin to 0. And that's what it's wanting us to do here, because you can't do a padding for a margin swap. You're going to have to specify the margin. So I'm going to do margin top. We're going to do 0. And then the padding, we want to make sure that is on the top. And we want this to be 60 pixels. So we're going to do 60 px. And don't forget to put those semicolons in there. And we're going to go ahead and check our code here. And hopefully we get a congratulations. All right, let's move on to the next step here. So step number 53, it is telling us that we want to add padding to the top and left side of any of our info elements that we gave it a class of info, and set all the other values to 0. So top and then the left. Okay, so again, it's been a while since we've been on the HTML page. I am going to utilize that little shortcut there of put an outline around this and see what are we talking about, what kind of changes am I looking at having here. And so I'm going to target the info class, and I have that outline here. And now I know which elements this step is talking about. Now, when it comes to the padding, and if you remember from any of our other videos when we're talking about CSS and we're talking about how we can group up all these properties all together into one property versus saying padding left, padding top, padding right, padding bottom, we can clump it all together just in one of these properties. And this one's going to be padding. Now, coming from a clock point of view, the first number that we put in there is going to be applied to the top. And so it says add a padding to the top. So let's go ahead and just do 10 pixels to the top. Okay, so now we can see there's a little bit of spacing in between each one of these here. And then it said for the left, let's add some more padding. Okay, now it doesn't give us any kind of values, but it does say, hey, for all the other ones, let's put a 0 in there. So remember, we're going around this as a clock. We just did the top. The next one is the, okay, and the right, it wants it to be 0. So let's add a 0. The next one is the bottom. Okay, let's go ahead and add a 0 to it as well. And then we get to the left side. It didn't tell us what it wanted, and so let's just go with 5 pixels. And that should be good enough for this check here. So that's how I would group it all together in one property here. And this starts with the top, then it goes to the right, the bottom, and then the left. Okay, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next. All right, so step number 54, we have an element here called form row, and it wants us to adjust the top margin on it, and then also adjust the left and right padding. That needs to be 0 on those. And then it says also increase the font size on all of the input elements. So let's go ahead and tackle this one step at a time. And let's see where in the heck is this form row coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and target that with our traditional outline. I don't see it here. Maybe it's down below. There it is. All right. So what are we wanting to do here with it? The margin, it said just give it a top margin. It didn't tell us any values. Let's just go ahead and use 30. I'll do margin top. We'll do 30 pixels. Okay, so we can take a look at that. We can see how it is now shifted down just a little there. Next, it wants us to add some padding to the left and right, and then all the other values should be 0, so that leaves us top and bottom. So we're going to do padding. We're going to do the top and bottom. That's going to be 0, and then let's just do 10 pixels for the left and right. And we can go ahead and scroll down and take a look at it, and it did give it some padding. Next is the input field. Let's go ahead and target it. So we're just going to do input. We're going to do font size, and then we can set that really to anything. And I think we can just do this with one REM, and it should work. That means anything that's inside of any of these input fields will be a little bit bigger than what it was before. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step here. Just wanted to take this real quick moment. If you are enjoying these videos and you're enjoying these lessons, take a look at freeCodeCamp, our website. We do have all of them in chronological order where you can see them. You can go to each one of them, and they're just put together really well for you in an organized manner where you're not having to try to search YouTube for the videos that we have done or have not done. A real great way to go about it. Also, if you are interested in, and this is going to be in the description as well, our freeCodeCamp Plus membership here. We call it Web Dev and Chill for our YouTubers out there. We have some limited availability places. Again, spots are limited, but you do get the ability to get graded feedback. You get live office hours, you get mobile access, and you get discounted one-on-one coaching. And so it really depends on how much you want to get out of your program and how fast you want to go to reach your dreams. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Go ahead and take a look in the description. You're going to find both of those on there. And like I said, we can help you out with your journey. All right. Okay. Back to the code here. All right. So step number 55 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it tells us that to make the first section look a little more in line, go ahead and target the input elements that are within inside of the info class. And so what it's asking us to do here is there's lots of info, there's lots of input fields, not info. There's lots of input fields that are on this page. And it says that it just wants us to target the ones that are in the info section. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to utilize the combinator, and we're going to target the info class. And then we're also going to hit the spacebar here, and we're going to target the input elements themselves. Now, inside of here, we can still do that outline that I'm talking about just to make sure that we're grabbing the right stuff. And so we're going to go ahead and do the outline. We're going to set that to 2 pixels, solid red. And you can see that now we are just targeting these. It's not targeting anything else, which is exactly what we wanted when it came to this part here. Okay, now it tells us that it wants us to make sure that the elements inside there, the width needs to be 50%. So let's go ahead and do width. We're going to do 50%. Okay, so you can see they're elongated there. And it says also do the text align and set it to the left. So left align the text. So we're going to do text align left. Okay, let's see if that's what it's asking for. And if not, we're going to see what it is. All right, congratulations. We're moving on to the next part here. Step number 56 in the building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp. It tells us that it wants us to target all the label elements that are inside of the info elements. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So we're going to do info and then the label. And then inside here, it wants us to set the width to be 10%. Okay. But then it doesn't want us to go any more. So it says do not take up less than 55 pixels. So we want the min width, we want that to be 55 pixels. And then let's go ahead and check our code for it. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step here. Okay, step number 57 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp. This one is trying to combine a few things. We're going to be grouping a couple classes together, and it just wants the display to be Inline-Block on here. So how are we going to go about this? We're going to do the info input, and then we're going to have the other one of info label, and then it wants the display to be Inline-Block. And I believe that is what it is wanting there. And you can see that everything's being shaped up very nicely where the widths of these input fields are all the same. So it makes it very eye-pleasing. And then this is where we have that minimum width type of scenario where they're all just really kind of lining up. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and check our code. I believe that should fix it here. Oh, I must have forgotten the last part here. It does say that it wants the label elements to be text aligned to right. Let's go ahead and change that last part here. So it just wants the labels, and so we can do text align right, and that should butt those things up together. We saw that right there happen. Let's go ahead and check our code now, and we got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. Step number 58 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp. It says let's neaten up the question block elements and set the CSS to the following properties. Again, let's target it with the dot and then the question block. And inside here, we'll definitely want to copy and paste each one of these, but I do want to make sure that we can visually see what is the question block if we haven't looked at it in a couple minutes here. So that we're going to go ahead and do the outline. We're going to do 2 pixels solid red, and that way we can see these blocks that we're going to be editing here. So next I'm going to paste what was on my clipboard, and you can see all the changes now are taking effect of each one of those elements where we saw a block around it. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. Let's keep on going. So step number 59 on building a quiz web page, it says make the H3 elements appear as a higher priority following this CSS property. So again, we're just going to do our H3, open up the curly brackets, and then we're going to paste in these items on here. And I believe what it's saying with more importance is we're giving it a larger font size to make it look more important. That's really what makes it there. And then we are adjusting the margin top and the padding left, which by default are different than what we have here. So it just gave us some values, we plugged them in, and we're going to go ahead and check our code now. There we go. We're moving on to the next step here. So we are on step number 60 of the freeCodeCamp, building a quiz web page, and it says that it's useful to see those field sets, which are these little borders that we're seeing right here around those questions. It's useful to see it during developer mode. However, it doesn't look that eye-pleasing. We're seeing it out in the wild once we are done with it, right? And so it wants us to remove the border altogether and then add the bottom padding. We want to set that to 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to target the question. And then once we do that, then we can come down here for the border and we can set that to none. And you'll see that blip, they just went away, right? Those field sets, the border around it are gone. And then the next thing that we want to do is we want to do the bottom padding, right? So padding bottom, we want to set that to 0. And that kind of move those questions a little bit closer together. But I believe that's what it's wanting for this. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. All right, we're on step number 61 in building a quiz web page. We're almost done here. It says while the unordered list and the LIs, the elements, they're great at providing like list items, meaning that we see these nice bulleted point lists. And it says that we can adjust those unordered list buttons or those little dots with the list style property. And it gives us an example here, and we can change it to a circle. But it wants us to remove the entire default styling of it, and we want to set that to none. And then it also wants us to remove the unordered list padding. So let's go ahead and target both of those here. And it wants us to utilize the answered list for the target. So that's what we're going to do. And then the list style, we want to set that to none. We should see those little bullet points just drop away on all of them, right? So there's the other two. And then it says, let's go ahead and remove the padding. So we're going to go ahead and do padding, and we're going to set that to 0. And that should give us what we need for passing this. Let's go ahead and double check. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. Step number 62, it says, give the submit button the freeCodeCamp style design. Utilize the following CSS properties. Okay, cool. So we're just going to target that button, which is that send button down here. And we are going to apply all of that CSS that we see above. So let's go ahead and do a button, and then we are going to apply this inside here. Let's scroll down, and then there is the send button. So display block, we got the margin. Remember that auto is what helps center it. The width, that's what gave it the width, so it's not as long. And then the padding, that's what gives it the space in between here. And a lot of these things going to the button CSS is going to be something that you may want to put in your coding notes, just because this is how you might want to style a button. You might want to refactor the code to fit your needs, but it gives you an idea or a concept on how can I stylize this button to make it look not like it was back in the 80s. Okay, let's go ahead and check our code. I'm sure it's good. And now we're moving on to the next part here. So step number 63, it says set the footer background color to the following hex, and then utilize Flexbox to center the text. So that's real quick and easy. Now, what do we want to do? What do we want to target here? Well, there's a semantic element there, footer, and we want to go ahead and set the display to flex. And then as far as horizontally centering it, and if I scroll down here, we're not going to see any kind of change whatsoever. But what we can do is do the justify content, and we want to set that to center. Okay. and we should see that now it is centered. Now we just have to apply that background color. So I'm going to go ahead and do background color and then grab that hex code. So now we can see it down there at the bottom. I may have to move my photo so you can see it a little bit better, but that's exactly what we wanted to do. Again, another thing that you may want to put in your coding notes: how do you center something utilizing Flexbox? There's justify content center. That is what's going to make that happen as far as left and right go, and that has the exact same effect on a single element that we saw with the margin left and right being auto. That also centers it, but that only does one element. All right, let's go ahead and check our code on this. I didn't say anything about the align items quite yet. I don't know if we're heading that direction or not, but let's go ahead and move on to the next step. So step number 64, it says that we cannot read the text on the target of the footer here, right? The freeCodeCamp, as well as any of this other text down here, blends in with the background, and we don't want that. So how do we adjust this to make sure that there's an adequate contrast ratio? We talked about this in the other video, going over the accessibility and what does that ratio mean. Again, I'll do a real quick demo and bring up the dev tools again just to reinforce that idea, that concept. But let's go ahead and target the footer as well as the footer anchor tag, because we do want to have that color be something else. And what color do we want it to be? And from our previous video, I believe we utilized this one right here, maybe. And I'm going to go and grab it and use it again down here. Now, what does it mean to be in compliance through the accessibility standards, right? And we can go ahead and test this out. I'm going to go ahead and hit F12. Again, I'm in Chrome. I got the dev tools pulled up. I'm going to use this little selector here, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and I'm just going to click on any of the text here because I want it to kind of show up here for the footer. So here we go. Now, how can we test this to see, are we in compliance? Is that a good color choice? If we click on this color here, and let's go ahead and do the contrast ratio. Let's change this. We're going to utilize this little eyedropper here, and then we're going to select the background. And notice that we get the green check mark for both being the AA compliance and the A compliance. And really, as long as you are above these two curves, then you will be meeting the needs for that contrast ratio. Because I can come down here and notice that they are now with the no sign, right? Like, we don't want that there. But anything above the curves, and if I go here, I'm in compliance with one, but not the other. But if I come over here, I'm in compliance with them both. And so that's how you can judge the compliance for the accessibility utilizing this contrast ratio. However, the original one that we did should be fine. And so I'm going to go ahead and check our code here. And we got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. Step number 65 says horizontally center the text within the address. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to target the address, and we'll do text align, and we want to set that to center. So that should center it. And then it says add some padding. It doesn't tell us how much. Let's just go ahead and do 10 pixels all around. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. So step number 66, it says clicking on the navigation links, they should jump to the relevant section, which they do, but it doesn't do it smoothly. And so by default, we want to alter the default and change it to a smooth behavior. And the way that we're going to go about this is we're going to say, hey, you know what? This whole page, let's go ahead and make that scroll behavior smooth. All right, so that should fix that problem here. I don't know if it's going to show us. There it goes. It does actually show us the scrolling aspect of this, and it's nice and smooth instead of real choppy and jumpy. So let's go ahead and check our code here. Congratulations. We are 99% done. Let's go ahead and move on to the next step here. So step number 67 says, finally, a certain type of motion-based animations can really cause some discomfort for some users. So in particular, people with vestibular disorders, they're very sensitive to motion triggers. Let's go ahead and set up a media rule that is called preferred reduced motion, and set that CSS based upon the user's animation preferences. So this can take one of the following rules. We can either do reduce or no preference. What it's asking us to do here is we're going to take this top part here and break it down, but essentially it wants us to utilize the scroll behavior to be smooth, and it wants us to wrap a media rule around this, and it's providing us with the feature and then the value, okay, right here. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So we're doing the at media. Here is the feature. Here is the value. And here is the selector or the styles that go in between it. This would typically be shifted in for readability wise. And then we want to close that off at the end. So in this case here, we're saying, hey, if the user doesn't have any preferences set up, then let's go ahead and use this smooth scrolling. Otherwise, if they have some special browser settings that they typically use, then let's take those into consideration when we're doing this, and that way it will just be really quick and jumpy and jump right to that section. Otherwise, it's going to utilize smooth scrolling. Let's go ahead and check our code here, and I believe that says that we are done with everything on this. All right, so cool. So we finished another project. It took us a couple videos to go through the entire thing. Hopefully you learned something. If you're watching it straight through, you're able to pick up on a few tips and tricks along the way. We definitely learned a few new things with the accessibility, and choosing those colors could be very key. And then at the very end of this whole module, we learned a little bit about a media query on how we can just say, hey, if you don't have any preferences whatsoever on your browser, let's go ahead and make that smooth scrolling. Otherwise, let's take into consideration for those that do have that vestibular disorder. All right, so thanks again for watching, thanks again for subscribing, and yeah, like always, we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.